Good morning. Welcome to ChamberLIVE. What positives can I take from COVID-19 and lockdown? This webinar was recorded on the 6th of May. All facts were believed to be correct at the time of recording, and the views expressed in the seminar don't necessarily represent the views of the East Lancashire Chamber of Commerce. Time to meet our guest speaker. With over 25 years HR experience, Louisa has worked with boards and senior management teams, developing strategically focused people and organisation solutions. She's worked on a variety of projects ranging from multi-billion pound export campaigns to mergers, large-scale change programmes, and her early career was focused in medium-sized manufacturing businesses, responsible for setting up a HR function, implementing new performance management systems, along with designing and implementing redundancy programmes. She's mainly operated in the UK throughout her career, but has also got experience of working in the Middle East. She established Collaborate Business Solutions 2015, and the business focuses on working with organisations, helping them through change. So whether that's personal change at an organisational level, Louisa is passionate about supporting the individuals affected at every step along the journey. Her work is predominantly focused around developing organisational capability through organisational design, leadership and management training, along with coaching and mentoring. And she's also licensed to deliver the suite of Lumina learning psychometrics. As well as all that, she's the mum of one very active 12-year-old swimmer who probably doesn't get much swimming done at the moment, and they live in Clitheroe. Let me introduce our speaker for this morning, Louisa Scanlan. Over to you, Louisa.
Thanks very much, Simon. Good morning, everybody. I suppose first things first from me is I hope everybody is safe and well and isn't going too stir crazy with lockdown. As Simon said, my swimmer is desperate to get back in the water, but we have yet to buy a pool for the back garden. So although she does keep putting it into my Amazon basket, so we'll just have to wait and see. But thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm really looking forward to sharing kind of my thoughts and ideas of what's happened around lockdown. And really what's been going on for me in this space and thinking about how we can potentially change what happens in our organisations and for ourselves as a result of what's happened with COVID-19 and lockdown. So I'm going to share my screen if it's going to work, which hopefully it will do. Just need to this is for this session to be interactive. I am really keen for us to use the chat. That's if it's going to work. There we go. For us to use the chat function to make sure that actually you're getting something out of this. So whilst, as Simon said, we are going to do Q&A at the very end, I want to make sure that we get some interaction here. You don't want to listen to me talk at you for the next hour, trust me. And so therefore, I would really like it if actually we got some interaction going. I will keep looking to my side here because I've got a second PC running whereby I can see the chat. So we want to get some questions through. So a little bit around kind of Collaborate and who we are and what we do. As Simon's already said, we are really around working with organisations to achieve their goals through their people. We're really focused on working with organisations going through change, and normally, I'll be honest with you, that is around growth agenda, but appreciating that at the moment, that agenda may well be quite different for a lot of people, and we may well be shifting away from growth to thinking about actually just how do we manage change and what's happened as a result of COVID-19. Our values are, we're incredibly passionate, so we're passionate about our own business. Clearly, I set this up, 5 years ago, and I'm passionate about it still being here for another 5 years. But I'm also really passionate about the clients and businesses that I work with. And those will range very much from large-scale organisations all the way down to one-man bands and understanding how they're going to grow and develop. We like to be imaginative and to offer some imaginative solutions, but they've got to be fit for purpose for the client. But we also like to challenge the status quo, and hopefully some of that will come out in some of the things I'm going to share with you today. We're quite inquisitive, or as my husband would describe it, nosy. But we like to bring hopefully a little bit of intellectual inquisitivity into your organisation to understand how it can potentially change and grow. And then we like to be able to see the big picture and be a bit visionary. And again, some of the tools that we'll be looking at today will deliver that to you as well. There is a bit of content today with regards to tools, ideas, thoughts, theory, etc. I don't want it to be too theory heavy, but there is some stuff there. And there are some elements whereby, as I said before, I need you to get involved. So just make sure you've got pen and paper with you to be able to jot down some thoughts and ideas as we go through the session. For those of you who know me and have worked with me before, I don't stand on ceremony. So yes, whilst we are doing the save questions to the end, if there is anything, please raise it in the chat. I'll ask Simon to kind of wave at me and say there's a question, and I'll answer it as we get to it. If not, hold on to the end if you want to. So where are we with regards to lockdown and what's happening? And I suppose for a lot of us, everything looks a bit different, excuse me. And there's an element of now we've probably come to accept what that difference looks like. We've acknowledged what that may well feel for us, and we've kind of allowed ourselves to be engrossed in what's going on. So just really quickly in the chat, what I'd like you to do is I'd just like you to share one word with regards to how it looks different for you. Okay, it may well be that it doesn't look different for you, but just one word that describes how it looks different. I'll keep an eye on those and I will share those back with you. So yeah, just drop in the chat. So somebody's got calm. So potentially that reduced intensity of commuting and having to travel and kind of being out and about. Exhausting. Yeah, I can relate to that. I think busier. Yeah. Quiet for some people. Uncertainty is definitely a big word that's coming through. For some people, they're happy. Connecting. Under stress. Yeah. Some innovation going on there. Yeah. Isolating. The unknown. Captivity. That's a really interesting word. It may well feel like that a little bit. But for some people, inspired. Focusing. Yeah. Okay. So there's some real resonation for me in there as well. So connecting's been a big thing for me since lockdown. I'll be honest with you, I went into an element of blind panic. My work was cancelled. I did not know what was going to happen. And there was a real sort of element of, you know, lack of control. And for those of you who know me, I am a little bit of a control freak. So I had to shift, and I had to start to think about how I'm going to shift. A few people put they're busier than ever. I think working from home has challenged me with regards to really thinking about actually my work space and my home space. One that's just come in here, value and our value of other things. So the value now that we now place on teachers. And our NHS and our key workers that maybe we didn't sort of see before. I am finding that actually I'm spending a lot more time working because I'm spending more time connecting. But my office, although I'm in my office today, my office at home is our dining table. So what I'm finding is my 12-year-old walks behind me a lot, going from the lounge to the kitchen. So actually it's not particularly conducive. But I think there's some real positives to take out of some of the change that we have seen. And for me, it's about gaining some focus, whether that be personally for you as an individual, but for you as your business. And again, this is some of the things that we're gonna have a look at today. So we kind of need to appreciate that all organisations are going to be dealing with this in a different way. And for some businesses, this is going to be huge. Not all organisations will be able to see a way through that current situation. And I know of a number of businesses that are either taking a positive choice to decide, actually, I'm going to wind up the operation, maybe because they were thinking of retiring soon, and this is a good time to do it, or have actually hit that brick wall whereby they can't see a way through it and unfortunately would have to fold their business. Some organisations will just about survive. But will need to change some of their existing work practices to enable them to get back to that level of sustainment and that level that they were at before. And some organisations will thrive and will make a success of realigning their business. And we see that quite a bit. As Simon said, I live in Clitheroe and I'm just watching the different ways organisations are going. A lot of them food-based organisations moving to delivery services, putting stuff online, and have shifted. I'm going to try and not use the words in this of pivot, uncertainty, unprecedented change, because they've just been so overused over the last few weeks. But I think there's always something that we can learn, and that's my key point of today's is focusing on the learning. I'm not going to ask you where your businesses are at this particular moment in time, because it can be quite personal if you're that business leader and owner. But what I would like you to do is just consciously think of, well, where do I think the organisation is? A tool which I think a number of you will have seen and will have embraced in previous potential training courses or things that you've been involved in, but something that has massively grown with regards to us trying to explain where we are in this current situation is the change curve. So let's just run through it. For some of you, you will know this already. So change and this curve, Kubler-Ross developed this, and it was actually to do with bereavement and grief. So we go through that initial denial phase of what's happened. There's then that kind of realization phase of potential shock and confusion. We'll resist what's happening. And I significantly went through resistance when it came to COVID-19. But I've had to kind of let go of you know, where we were before and actually start to look through this searching phase. So there's that bit of anxiety, uncertainty, fear and frustration. I've then started to understand, not all of it, but understand some of the change that I might need to go through in my business and then get to that optimizing point. And then we accept the change. So we have a poll, which I'm going to ask Simon to just ping up. So I'd like you to just have a look at that change curve and just decide against the poll where you think you are. So if we can launch the poll, Simon, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, just give you a couple more seconds and then we'll open it. Excuse me. Okay, so response to the change. Interestingly, looking like it's moving up that upward trajectory. We've got a few people that are still in that realization phase, so that shock and confusion potentially still coming through. But the majority of you are either at searching. So if we look at the words around searching, we're looking at potentially some anxiety and uncertainty, a little bit of fear and frustration, potentially beginning to creep through. The majority of you, 53%, are at that point of understanding the change. So there's some optimism and there's some ideas beginning to generate as to what's happening. And I really hope that this webinar will start to trigger how you can potentially implement some of those ideas. And then we've got the change being accepted, so which is 22% of people. So they've really begun to shift and think about those new beginnings and how those new beginnings could potentially elicit something really powerful and maybe really different for their organisations. McKinsey have been doing some work on the trajectory of how we respond immediately to a pandemic crisis, and it follows the change curve. So it's very, very clear with regards to it's following the change curve. And actually, by the looks of what you've just said with regards to the poll, actually we're in that hopeful, curious, nervous phase and looking at the return to normal phase. Potentially a bit concerned about returning to normal as well. And again, we're gonna trigger some of that later as to what that might look like. What it means for us as leaders and managers, though, is it means that we are now having to potentially fall into that bucket of having some vision with regards to our organisation and thinking about how we rebuild that business and acknowledging where people have been as part of that change. So the seminar is definitely going to focus on the visioning piece and that piece around acknowledgement and how we shift and move ourselves as organisations. So let's have a look at a bit of a model that you could potentially use, and I'm going to ask you to do this as an activity. So during times of change, I think can drive massive opportunities with innovation. But quite easily and quite often we fall into negative. So I'm going to use a scenario and an example, and this is some work that I've been using for quite a while, but if you want to get some more information, there's a brilliant TEDx talk by a guy called Jason Clark. So it's TEDx Perth if you want to kind of dive into this in a little bit more detail. So for any of you who have children, small children, and the first few times that they decide they're going to charge across the park to get to the swings, get to the slide, go and see a friend, go and feed the ducks, and your child falls over, and there's a space and a gap then into how we react. So us mothers, and I'm not saying it's all of us, but I'll hands up and I will say it, go to the negative side, which is a bit, oh no, what's wrong? Are you okay? At which point our child is then likely to react negatively. So they burst into tears and cry and say that they've hurt themselves. So I'd like you to just very quickly jot down what you would put in that negative box with regards to what's happened as a result of COVID-19 and lockdown. So that could be personally, and it could be for you as your business. So just jot down a couple of things that have been negative in this particular situation for you. I am going to ask you to share if you want to. So in a minute, I'll just get Simon to unmute everybody. And then if you want to share your thoughts, then that'll be really useful just to see where everybody currently is.
Yeah, rather than me unmute 39 people, I would say just unmute yourself, say what you want to say, and then mute yourself again afterwards. That's probably easier.
Okay, we've got one in the chat box actually, which is no sailing. So I'm very sorry, Sarah. You're like my daughter with no swimming. So just unmute yourself if you've got something. I think Thomas, you're unmuted. I can see.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from a business point of view, the negative was people not really understanding the value that we can offer still, even though we're online.
Yep. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Anybody else got anything negative that they want to share that's happened?
From a personal point of view, I would say my work-life balance is non-existent now.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So you're finding you're working more because actually it's all in one place.
Yeah, I never actually leave the room that I'm now sat in from 7 in the morning till 7 at night.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. Excellent. So we've got, who's that?
I'm not Sarah.
No, you're not Sarah. Definitely not Sarah.
No, that's my wife. For some reason, it just keeps coming up with Sarah. But never mind. Yeah, I mean, I do sailing as a sport, but I'm a sailing instructor. And we had a couple of schools lined up again to come to our sailing club. So that's kind of my main problem at the moment, as far as I'm concerned. But overall, I'm feeling okay.
Okay, excellent, fantastic, thank you. A few more on the chat. So my 16-year-old has had no school for 6 months, so no prom, GCSE, and just, you know, that arbitrary grade that those individuals are going to get. And I think that's going to be a really interesting challenge for our education sector. Missing people, so fewer distractions, everything social, loss of business and reduced workforce, a couple of big pieces of work being postponed, you know, and that impact on our sales. As I said to you before, you know, I love this, lack of places to go with my camera and the release of being able to relax and kind of take that shift away. As I alluded to at the beginning, I was in a very similar position. My work literally just disappeared overnight. As a trainer, facilitator, you know, you need to be in a room with people you need to be doing, or, you know, maybe we don't, that's what we need to find out. But that's where my work was, and mine just completely disappeared, hence the negativity that I felt in the situation. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to think about the box in the middle, and the box in the middle is the place whereby innovation, thought and ideas are really creative. So go back to our analogy of the small child falling over. At that point of falling over, before a parent reacts, that child is at the point that kind of goes, not quite sure what to think of this. Is it good? Is it bad? It's what we call that space between action and reaction. So I'd like you again just to think about, what have you found that's been quite interesting about lockdown and how you've potentially viewed things, seen things slightly differently. So what's been interesting about what's happened as a result of being in lockdown? Again, you can either put your answers in the chat, or we can unmute a few people once you've had a chance to think about it. So somebody said they've enjoyed their new work regime. Help for homeless, sorry. So getting more involved maybe in volunteering work that you've not been able to have the opportunity to do. Working from home is quite good. I don't need the company of others as much as I thought I did. In fact, I'm quite enjoying being on my own. adaptation to Zoom and team calls. Yeah, we don't need to do everything in person. Transitioning to working from home, again, this enjoying new technology. Who'd have thought that actually we'd be comfortable to do some of this stuff? I must admit, I'm going to have to get some better headphones because these ears just really don't work after several days of kind of being on them. An element of that's really interesting. Somebody's missing commuting to meetings. I'm missing being in my car. I'll be really honest with you. My Audible has not got the amount of use that I've had before. Opportunities to create new, improved value for clients, new ways of working and thinking, seeing how different team members react. Much happier working alone from home and being more productive. So some really interesting things there, and stuff that probably none of us, until we were thrown into this, thought that this could be an opportunity. The thing with the interesting box is this is the bit that I really encourage you to stay curious about, because as and when we start to come out of lockdown, some of these things, some of these interesting things, we might end losing focus on and not sharing. So the final section is positive, and I'm going to unmute a few of you for this one because I want to get that vibe and that energy around some of those positive things. I'm going to go back to using my potentially slightly sexist analogy of the parent-child thing. But I know it from experience, my reaction always was the more negative, oh gosh, has she hurt herself? Whereas my husband would be like, wow, that was really funny, ha ha, should we carry on? And it's likely if we take that positive view that, you know, we will spin a more positive thought out of things. So finally, what's been positive? What have you found that's been quite exciting and quite energizing? So for me, actually, I've actually loved having all of my family at home and having them around me. I was quite surprised. I thought it would be a real challenge, but actually I've really enjoyed having my daughter with me all the time. But what has been a real positive for you that's come out of what's happened? So the business works fine remotely, done couch to 5K in 6 weeks. That's amazing. So picking up lost hobbies, enjoying a beer every day. Excellent. Focusing on the environmental improvements that, you know, that's really, really important. Less distractions during the workday. I don't have kids. Yeah. Enjoying exercise for the first time, spending time at home. Encourage us to explore new avenues we might not have explored without. Yeah, how many of us from a business point of view have had to think about doing different things, not needing the gym? So yeah, I don't think I've ever walked as much as I am doing now. Somebody's playing the drums, fantastic. Reevaluating our business and seeing the true side of staff. So that furlough piece has been massive for a lot of organisations. Cash flow, spending on less I can't say that word, Simon. You know what I mean, items. I must admit my spending on my Amazon account has dropped quite considerably over the last few weeks. Anybody want to come in and just explain a little bit more around where they've been, anything really positive they want to take away? Tom, I just seen you come off your mic.
Yeah, I mean, going back to obviously Physiofusion beforehand, we ummed and ahed about kind of making our services online so we could go outside of maybe the Northwest to help businesses. And we were always that little bit unsure, maybe not had the confidence to launch it or push it. And then as soon as kind of this whole lockdown thing happened, we were almost forced to go into it, and we've seen positives to come out from it. So we're actually really pleased in that sense that we've kind of been given that push as a business. So
yeah, fantastic. Anybody else, any other positive reflections they want to share? Somebody's just shared in the chat box, online quizzes. How many of us now do a regular quiz with family? We do one for our swim club. You know, all of us suddenly become experts in quizzing and dingbats and all sorts that we probably never did before. So focusing on those positives and the interesting bits are where I want the conversation to kind of now move forward. So for me, this is all around developing a culture of innovation and being more innovative. Innovation doesn't just have to be around product or service. It can be around the way that we think. So as Simon said in the introduction, I am a Lumina practitioner. So I work with something called a number of Lumina tools. This is a Lumina innovation model, but very much thinking about your culture and how you can innovate. We've all had to start to get to a point whereby we've broken things. We've changed things incredibly quickly. Who would have thought 3 months ago that actually we would have been doing what we're doing now with regards to shifting our product and service? And how can we continue to do that when we go back to work? I don't want to talk about returning to work in the way that we've always returned. I want us to think about how can we return to work differently. I'm really passionate about organisations being different, and therefore how can we instill some of that difference now as we move back into our businesses. So let's think about our culture. So from an organisation point of view, has anything shifted? Has anything changed? Has your culture stood up to being shifted and moved online? And I've heard some amazing stuff that's been going on with organisations that's actually got to the point whereby they feel their identity and their culture is stronger, even though they're further apart, because they're connecting a lot more with what they're doing and how they're feeling. They're asking questions like, how are you today? No disrespect to anybody, and listening to the answer, because we're having to build that level of connectivity. So thinking about how our cultures have developed. Some of these questions for me are absolutely key. So again, just have a bit of a think. So have you made decisions during lockdown that would normally have been made by somebody more senior? Have you empowered your teams to make more decisions for themselves? And have you looked at a business process and wondered, why do we do it like this? So again, just quick response in the chat. You know, have you or are you letting other people make decisions that maybe they wouldn't normally have made? What I'm finding with clients that I'm talking to and working with is a lot of individuals are getting to the point whereby they are actually, so there we go, somebody saying that their wife's having more time to plan and make some decisions, potentially. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they are now realizing actually that the staff who are working through some of these activities are best placed to make some of those decisions. So somebody said that, I don't think we'll ever go back to 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in the office, although they were quite flexible before. So, you know, I had somebody the other day talking me through a process that they used to work with, and actually it's not fit for purpose with how they're working now. And you know what? It's actually working better. Definitely looking at lots of business processes and questioning why and how they were developed and how we can operate them and be quicker without them. Less stressful, so we've got more time to plan and make decisions. Feel more reactive than being proactive, but hoping that changes. Thanks, Neil. It's nice to reflect that actually maybe some of us are feeling a little bit more reactive because things are changing. My challenge here is, and the reason I'm passionate about this type of work is I genuinely think that there are a lot of people in the organisations who are really superbly placed to make decisions, but sometimes maybe don't feel empowered or able to make those decisions because they might not feel as if they have that level of seniority. I think what's happening as a result of this is more and more people are actually feeling more empowered. They're allowing their teams to go and work and do things at their own pace, and being able to work in a really, really constructive way. I think everybody has to do this. Somebody put, some innovations client were resistant to, but now everyone's had to work in this way. They're hoping that they'll be more sustainable in the future. And this is about sustainability. I'm going to use a phrase later, which I've coined and stolen off a friend of mine, and I will give her due credit for, which is all about how do we build back rather than bounce back? Because if we bounce back, potentially we return to the norm. This is around building a new frame of reference. And two things that have come out massively for me: trust. I think we're at a point whereby we're potentially a little bit more trusting of people in the organisation to get on and do the work. We're no longer able to look over shoulders. And we've also become a lot more tolerant. So interestingly, Simon was saying about kids running around or cats sitting on laptops. We're a lot more tolerant now of people being able to work from home and thinking about how do we adapt. I had to do a call the other day to a lady in Canada. I was giving her some psychometric feedback. Her 2-year-old screamed throughout the entire thing, and her fire alarm went off 3 times in her house. The poor woman was absolutely distraught, but we got through it because we have to be tolerant and acceptance that this is not the norm and things have changed. So businesses have been forced to find new ways of working, and they've had to shift. There are some very, very useful tools, and one of which I'll share with you at the very end with regards to how you can refocus your business. Again, thinking about how decisions are being made before, removing some of that bureaucracy that maybe we don't need, but we felt we needed because we didn't have the opportunity to challenge it. We've now been given that. Rethink about how your organisation keeps your competitive advantage. So what Thomas was saying, we've now all of a sudden gone online. Who would have thought that actually that would have happened, but you've now been forced to do it? So how can we retain that competitive advantage? Companies that have adapted well are likely to have a strong sense of identity, which is why it's really important at this point, I think, to have a look at your culture. What's your purpose of your organisation? How does your culture reflect that? What shifted and changed as a result of COVID? Nimble teams, self-managed teams, small groups of people with a very, very clear set of goals and achievements and direction that enable them to be more dynamic and make decisions. So I think we're going to see businesses shift from very large hierarchies to much smaller, nimble teams, aligning our talent with some of those challenges. Idea creation and generation, and we need to continue to invest in learning. I'm not just saying that because that's my business, but we need to continue to say, actually, people need to learn and develop. This is probably my favourite model when it comes to describing an organisation and what we mean by difference in organisations. So if you haven't come across this before, this is something called Reinventing Organisations by a gentleman called Frederick Laloux. He wrote an incredibly strong and powerful book a couple of years ago around how organisations have changed. And I think because of what's happened with COVID-19 is I think we'll see an awful lot of organisations moving more to what we call the green organisation, which is about individuals being more engaged, individuals being more empowered to make decisions for themselves. A lot of organisations potentially would have sat in the red section, which is very much around thinking about competition and thinking about profit and thinking about how do we achieve our objectives and how do we sustain our shareholders, rather than thinking about our stakeholders. So who is invested and engaged in our business? So I think we're going to start to see a bit more of a shift of organisations moving into that green space, smaller teams, teams going off and not quite doing their own thing, but being empowered to be able to make those decisions for themselves. And I'm hoping that this will start to generate some of that shift in businesses. So again, I'm encouraging you to kind of go away and look at your own organisations, look at your organisation structure. Has that structure served you well through this? Or actually, because you've maybe broken the structure down a little bit and put people into little different groups, little working teams, has that helped? I watched somebody the other day working through a scenario, and actually they took it so far down into the organisation before they brought it back up again that the result was completely different. So the manager was very clear this was the way it was going to need it to be done. The team went away and worked it, came back with a different scenario, at which the manager went, no, that's exactly what we need to do, and now we need to move it forward. So pushing things down more into our businesses and empowering our teams more, I think, is definitely the way that we're going to start to see the shift. I want to talk to you a little bit about Agile. I'm really passionate about Agile. I do not come from a software background, although I was HR in a software team for a number of years. But the social and emotional side of this diagram is the bit that I want to tap into with you. And it goes back a bit to what we've talked to before. The 4 values of an Agile, of making organizations more agile and having that Agile mindset. Individuals and interactions. How much have we seen of that over the last 6 weeks? You know, we've been on our own, but actually we've been interacting on a completely different level. I now have a collaboration with somebody that I have been following for years. He's a really, really strong thinker in the HR space. Never would have thought I would have had the opportunity to talk to him, apart from seeing him at conferences, for example. He reached out on Twitter after I responded to one of his tweets. We've now had 2 conference calls. I dialed into one of the calls he was doing the other day, and he actually came back and asked me for feedback as to how it had gone. So I now have a collaboration there with somebody I never thought that I would have a collaboration with. We're working solutions in a different way, and we're responding to change in a different way. So I would really advocate starting to think actually how you could potentially implement some agile concepts and agile thoughts into your organization. So some of those things, and what does that look like for you? Agile leadership. So that's being really, really stringent with regards to not dropping back into command and control, which is very, very easy to do. So we're looking at supportive leadership rather than the tell and do leadership style. Well-being and fulfillment. You want a job whereby your well-being is looked after and protected, and that's become absolutely key through this process. So again, going back to thinking about how do we ensure well-being and how do we make sure that the jobs are fulfilling for the people that do them. We want to have real purpose and meaningful results. Again, going back to that sense of purpose, How many of us have looked out? How many of us stand out every Thursday and clap for those key workers? So that sense of meaning around job is incredibly important. And we've really seen that come through with regards to how we've seen our shift and perception. How many of us respected teaching, but now have an incredibly deep respect for teaching, seeing how actually we've had to potentially take that mantle on. Adaptability to change is absolutely key. We've talked about it already, trust and transparency. We need to start to break down some of those barriers around how much we trust people in our business to get on with things. There will always be the lowest common denominator of individual who potentially we can't trust and rely on to do the work. But I bet you 99% of your teams are actually being very productive, and actually you are fully trusting to get on and do the work that they need to do. Collaborative communities, we've already talked about, and innovation, learning, and continual development of strengths is something that really sits in our mindset. And it's the difference between growth and fixed. So have you got a growth mindset or have you got a fixed mindset? So do we learn from our mistakes? Do we accept challenges? The ability to learn new things? Are we inspired by other success? I think all of us potentially have fitted into both of these mindsets over the last 6 to 8 weeks. I know that I got very fixed mindset at the beginning. I was scared. I was nervous. I was terrified of what it was going to be for my business. You know, do I just give up now, fold the organization and go back and get a proper job, as my husband would say? Or actually, do I need to flip my mindset to be more growth? So some of the things you will look for being in growth mindset is shift out of your comfort zone. And by God, have we been out of our comfort zone for the last few weeks? You know, ask questions, accept you can't do something, you know, learn well over learning fast. Think about, you know, actually, what have I learned? How much have we reflected over the last few weeks? How much have we given ourselves space and time to potentially reflect? So again, another really useful model to start to maybe think and challenge how you've dealt with this particular situation. But for me, it's all about engagement with your teams. Your teams are learning. So even those that are furloughed, they have the opportunity to continue to learn, but by being furloughed, they will have experienced certain things and there will be learning that will come from that. So we always feel more attached and engaged with change if we've had the opportunity to shape it. So the difference between imposed or authorship. So authorship equals ownership. The more you've had the opportunity to design something, be involved with it, the more likely you are going to be to thinking about, actually, I'm going to own this. Yeah. So here's a really, really practical 4-box for you. And I'd like you to kind of play with this a little bit. Thanks, Al. I've just got your question. I'll pick it up in a minute. So here's a really interesting one around authorship. How many of you have had a spring cleaning activity whilst you have been on lockdown? So who's got much cleaner kitchen cupboards, you know, much cleaner cabinets of stuff just used to be, you know, shoved in. I'm sure there's a lot of us that have gone through this. So here's a process of thinking about change for you and getting some authorship that you can get your teams to start thinking about. So when we think about what's happened through this process, or we think about work in general, what are the things that we want to keep? What's been really, really important and actually we need to keep, we don't want to throw out, yeah? So again, going back to that analogy of the kitchen cupboards, what's the thing that we've kept, yeah? What are those things that we're not going to throw out? The next box is what's the stuff we're going to chuck? What are we going to get rid of as a result of change, as a result of what's happened, a process that no longer works? We're going to get rid of our IT system, actually, because it's not been supporting us in what we need to do. Yeah. So what are you going to chuck as a result of what's happened? What are you going to change? So there may well be things that you've got, but actually, do you know what? I need to do these in a slightly different way. So, you know, I've kept my flour because it's in date and you can't get flour anywhere. You know, I've chucked the old packet of pasta that's been stuck at the back of the cupboard for the last, you know, 4 months, 4 years, probably actually in our house. What I'm going to change is I'm going to change the order of my cupboard, and I'm going to put the stuff that I use towards the front rather than hiding at the back. And then I just go out and buy some, you know, buy some more of it. So what are you going to change about what you've done? And then finally, what are you going to add? What processes have you got rid of? Do you have to add something different? Do you have to add a different way of communicating with your team? Do you have to add more bandwidth to your internal servers? Do you have to add, you know, more laptop services available within your organization? So what are you going to keep? What are you going to chuck? What are you going to change? What are you going to add? And for me, every single person in your organization can be part of this debate. Yeah. So even those that are currently on furlough, and you're looking at a point, you know, within the next few weeks to potentially bring them back, this is a really, really useful 4-box model just to throw out and say to people, what have you learned? What have you learned about your experiences, and actually what can we learn as an organization by using this as an exercise? So what can I keep? What can I chuck? What can I change? And what can I add? If you use the analogy of your kitchen cupboard, you use the analogy of what you've done with your spring clean, it makes it really, really visible to those individuals within your organization if you're asking them to do it. So really, really critical one for me, that one, and a great model just to kind of spin out and make you think a little bit differently. Need to keep an eye on time. How many of you look back at your business strategy over the last few weeks? So how are you going to restart your business? What have you learned about how you operate, and how do you rethink the purpose of your organization? Some of you may well be familiar with this, the business model canvas out by a guy called Alex Osterwalder. Really, really useful tool just to do that analysis of your organization. These slides will be shared, but if you want the next slide as a copy, please do let me know. Somebody developed the Corona canvas. So this is your opportunity to kind of throw rocks at your existing business model canvas and get you to start to think about actually what's happened as a result. Yeah. So some of those questions, you know, do you still have a product that's fit for the market? Or do you potentially need to shift where your market's going to go? How have your key stakeholders been affected? And how might they be affected going forward in the future? So one of my key clients is highly likely to be needing to shift their operation markedly over the next 6 months. And it's highly likely I won't be doing work with them in that time. So what does that mean for me? Yeah. So how have my clients been affected by what's happened? So this is the Corona canvas. I would really recommend that you have a look at it for your organizations and think about, where is my business and how do I need to potentially shift and change it? Please do this though from that positive lens, that positive mindset. You've all got very successful organizations that hopefully will be able to transition in a shape or form out of this. So think about actually, how am I going to do that? So this was the phrase that I coined off my friend. Shona Marshall, who's one of my associates, one of our collaborator associates, came back with build back ability, not bounce back ability. So what do we mean by build back ability? Bounce back ability for me was always about getting yourself back to where you'd come from. So I've been knocked down a little bit, and actually I need to pick myself back up again. So, you know, but I'm going to go back to my norm. Build back ability for me is about, how do I potentially rebuild some of those blocks? Yeah. So my blocks used to go in that direction. Actually, I need to move a few that way, and I need to move a few this way. So your build back ability now is what's really important. So using the canvas, using the chuck, keep, change model, and start to understand what that might look like can be really powerful. So what is your build back ability? Yeah, not your bounce back, because although I'm trying not to use the phrase the new normal, we aren't potentially going to go back to a sense of normality or what we perceived. And actually, should we? And that's always been a bit of a challenge of mine. Should we be going back? There's some brilliant nuggets of things that have happened in businesses over the last 6 weeks. Don't throw them out. So where do they come into your build back ability rather than your bounce back ability? But this is not for everybody. So I have quite a positive mindset. I always have had quite a positive mindset. That's been challenged quite a bit over the last few weeks, but it's also not for everyone. So working from home isn't for everybody. Being detached from our friends, social isolation, being furloughed, worrying about our finances, worrying about family and friends. So when we are thinking about going back to that authorship piece, we also need to think about what is important for those individuals in our organisation. I was talking to somebody, an old colleague of mine, over the weekend, and she was saying that she'd had a conversation with somebody who doesn't want to work from home, over the longer term, because actually the social side of work is what's been the most important to them, and they're missing that. They've got grown-up children, they've got grandchildren that they can't see, they're feeling very, very detached. Going to work for them was a huge part of their lives, as it is for a lot of people. So when we are looking to do that re-engagement, maybe with individuals who are furloughed, I think we need to have a level of positivity, but recognise where everybody else is. So this is where our authenticity as managers need to come in as well. You know, we need to understand and be empathetic to where people are. So then, how have you found leading the crisis as you as a manager? So again, just very quickly jot down what you've learned about yourself, what challenges you've overcome maybe. What have you learned about you as a leader? Just very, very quickly, just put a couple of bits in the chat. What have you learned about you as being a leader? And what's important for me is actually, whilst we might not have the title of leader in our organisations, actually we're all potentially leaders. So you're leaders for your piece of work. You're potentially supporting your home. So, you know, I went into a bit of blind panic of, am I going to be able to feed my family? Because you can't get anything in a supermarket. So what qualities came through there for me? So how's it felt? What's been different? What have you learned about yourself as being a leader in this activity, or this lockdown, this process we've been through? Just a couple of bits on chat, just let me know. I've kept my anxiety levels in control, which is great. I can lead. Fantastic. Thank you, Helena. Yeah, we've all had to potentially take up a bit of a role there, haven't we? And kind of step up. I can trust people to work on projects remotely, yeah. How much I value to be busy. I've got to trust my instincts more. Yeah, try to be more positive, learn different skills working from home. You can trust and empower people more. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, definitely. I've been advocating it for a long time with clients, but sometimes it takes this shift, this kick for us to realize actually, you know, we can do it. Working from home, which I avoided like the plague before. Thanks, Amber, I know that. Kept learning and developing. Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. So quick view on leading. So we potentially lead in different ways. Oh, that's brilliant, Neil. Thank you. My imposter syndrome is non-existent. That's interesting. I feel less judged being away from the office. Fantastic. That's amazing learning. Thank you, Neil. Thanks for sharing. So here's a model for leadership. It's another Lumina model. So just have a quick read at some of the words behind. We're going to do one more poll. I'd just like to understand how you describe your style. I am unfortunately going to put you in a box. So I need you to decide whether you're leading with vision, whether you lead with drive, whether you lead to deliver, or whether you lead through people. So just have a quick read of some of those words and just see pre-pandemic, what sort of style do you think that you had? And do you think it's changed as a result of what we've gone through? So what kind of a leader do you think you were pre-pandemic? I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that. Okay, we have our results, Simon. Oh, there we go. So leading with vision was very strong. So a passion for learning, energizing and inspiring others, strategic thinking. Yeah, and we've got quite a lot of leading with drive. So striving for excellence and results, drive and determination really coming out. You will be a blend of these styles. Lumina is very, very clear. We don't put people in boxes. So you will be a blend of these styles. But potentially our style has been affected by what's happened. So we sometimes overextend. I won't go through this in great detail, but I will tell you where my overextensions have been over the last couple of weeks. I have become planning obsessed, but I just plan on a vague idea that I might know what's going to happen at the end of this. And actually, it's not particularly useful for me and hasn't been particularly useful for me at all. And I am a people pleaser. So I sit in that top box around pleasing everybody. And I haven't been able to do this through the pandemic. Yeah. Because I physically can't please everybody, because I can't deliver what it is that I want to deliver to them until we find a way of being able to do that. So I've been tested, my overextensions have been triggered. So how do I work through this? And why am I sharing this? And why are these people important? They are important because we are literally, as a family, watching every single Avengers movie from start to finish. So we're going through that process. But this is all about who your tribe. So as a result of this, who has stood behind you? Who do you need in your organization? Who are the critical people that maybe you didn't realize were critical before? So define your tribe to help you move your business forward and help you make those changes. So who are your Avengers? Yeah. If you're going to be Captain America, who are the Avengers that stand behind you? You know, when the proverbial happens and we get into those horrible situations. I'm a real believer that there is some real positivities to take out of this, notwithstanding that some organisations potentially won't get through this. Economically, we're going to be in a very, very difficult situation as a country and potentially in our businesses, but there are some massive positives. So I want to leave you with a thought, which is, I want to get to a place whereby organisations feel more empowered, teams feel as if they can make decisions more, they feel a lot more engaged. I think this has been a really pivotal opportunity to do it. I am hoping that this is going to work. I did test this yesterday. I have not ever done a video through Zoom before, but I did put my music on before. I'm going to leave you with this as a thought, and then hopefully if it decides it's going to work, please work. We'll get the sound through as well. Let's just hope that it's going to play. I bet it's not going to do it. It is. Oops, just need to get it back to the beginning.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So potentially a few of you may well have seen that before. It is one of my ultimate favourites when it comes to kind of sharing and thinking about leadership. If you want to try and find it, my screen is not going to jump onto the next slide. If you want to try and find it on YouTube, it's literally shirtless dancing guy. But the whole point of showing that is actually is you know, there are some little sparks, yeah, and there are some people in your organisation at the moment that are, you know, dancing and doing very different things for your organisation. So embrace it, engage it, and actually start to bring it into our business. I believe that there are a lot of positives that we can learn from COVID and what's happened with our organisations, and I hope that I've been able to share some of that with you this morning. So apologies, we are almost at 11:30. Sorry, Simon. So any questions, please kind of open it up and fire away.
Yeah, don't apologise. That was great. Thanks, Louisa. We had one question in the chat from Al. Do you want to come in, Al?
Hello, Mr. Simonite.
Hello, Louisa. I think you kind of answered it anyway, which is that comment you made about furloughed workers, which I've just struck a chord with me, is how do we engage those people so that we can use the learning that they've been doing to help them re-engage in the workforce when they do come back in?
Yeah. So keep the communication lines open. So from a furlough perspective, no, they're not allowed to be working. But I do think that 4-box grid is quite useful to just get them start to jot down some thoughts. When you're checking in with your furloughed employees, they will be starting to share things with you anyway. Get them logged on to things like this, you know, the ChamberLIVE, other free webinars that are going on. Encourage them to do that learning, but then ask them about it when you do those check-in calls afterwards. So get them to kind of re-engage with you. It's really important, although they're furloughed, they're still employees of your business, and we need to keep those lines of communication going. So I would just check in. What have they been up to? Maybe use that 4-box model, the check, you know, check, chuck, change and add, and ask them to start thinking about, you know, what have they learned as a result of what's happened. So yeah, check in and just keep asking the questions, Al, would be my thing with regards to furlough.
Thank you.
Cheers, Al.
So we'll just take 2 questions, and if that's all right, Louisa. We've got Amber, yep, and then we'll go to Paul. So Amber first.
Hi, Amber. Oh,
I've just muted you now, Amber. Sorry. No, you do it. You do it.
Every time we do this. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Amber.
Yes. So I was just asking a question about keeping teams engaged when you're all remote. So
yes,
none of us have seen each other for at least 6 weeks. Yeah. So, you know, we're trying to keep in touch and having Skype calls and all that kind of thing. I just wondered if you had any professional solutions that would help.
So for me, you're probably doing a lot of this stuff anyway. So the regular calls, the regular communication, I would always do the fun stuff because I think the fun stuff's the stuff that's important. That's the bit that we're probably missing the most. I would probably at this point, if we are thinking about reopening to get the actual organisation kind of back up and running in a physical space, you know, how they're feeling about it. I would always check in with feelings before I check in with anything else. So, you know, those real, genuine, authentic conversations, you know, I'm feeling a bit rubbish. Actually, so am I. So let's have a chat about it. I think we've got to get to a point whereby we start to get them to design what we think that future is going to look like for them. So for some of us, it's going to be, I don't know how I'm going to get back to work, as in physical work, because my kids aren't going to go back to school until September. So how are we as organisations going to do that? So for me, it's always about thinking about the positives, what have they learned, that interesting box we did at the beginning, you know, what's really challenged them and what are they staying curious about and how you can help with that. But chuck in the fun stuff. If it's somebody's birthday, acknowledge it's somebody's birthday, wedding anniversary, all that kind of good thing. You know, we're doing it with the, you know, with the quiz, with the swim team, or do some really proper random stuff potentially, you know, and think about, you know, like the chamber are doing the exercises, you know, I don't know whether we want to all see us, you know, in lycra, but actually it's that sort of stuff that get people a little bit out of their comfort zone. But I would start to have that challenge that says, how are you feeling about potentially, you know, work becoming a little bit more normal again? What have you liked? What have you not liked? Does that help, Amber?
Yeah, thank you. And I think we are doing quite a bit of that about designing a new future and that kind of thing. Yeah. But I think definitely this thinking about the positives has helped. So I think we might add that to our fun stuff.
Yeah, excellent. Brilliant. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you.
Can I add some? Sorry,
go on, Karen. You go on, Karen.
It's just that about 4 or 5 companies have contacted Fitness Evolution and said to them, will you run a remote live, but within a safe confines of just the members of staff who we say exercise thing. And they've had great fun doing it. We must have had about 40 different sessions, just half an hour. Anyway, if anyone wants that, Fitness Evolution will do it free for you. So just to throw that into the mix. Thanks,
Karen. I must admit, I felt compelled to do Joe Wicks when it all started happening. You'll be pleased to know I've done none of them. So there was that element of, yay, no, maybe not. So I just let my daughter jump around. It's fine. I've gone walking. That's my fitness bit.
the companies have liked it because it's just been 6 or 7 of them who are normally friends in a day-to-day work thing, and they've just laughed doing it. I don't think anyone's done it properly.
No, brilliant, fantastic. Thanks, Karen.
Last question, Paul.
Yeah, it's just a thought that I had. It's like, you know, my wife sort of saying, "Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that." I said, you know, if you're not careful, you'll go down one route, and then when things do return to normal, you'll kind of be stuck in this other world. And I think if we're not careful, we can possibly overreact, and we perhaps just need to do a little bit of sitting and waiting and just be patient.
I think there's an element of we can't sit and wait, you know, infinitum, because we don't actually know what's going to happen. So for me, it's being able to understand, actually, if it went this way, I think we could do this. If it returns to normal, we'll carry on doing. So that COVID canvas is really interesting, actually, because it gets you just to start to think, actually, you know, I need to retain this part of my business. So how am I going to do that? Can I put it all online? I've made a decision at the moment. I haven't put my stuff online yet. And that's just a conscious decision I've made for my business. Now that might shift, and certain elements I'm beginning to look at. But there's an element of my work that I like to be able to do face to face. So I'm kind of coming up with multiple options rather than just suddenly going, everything's going online and shifting. So for me, it's about scenario planning. Tom with Physio Fusion was talking earlier about, you know, they thought about doing it and didn't do it. So for me, it's about scenario plan a few things and have some stuff in your back pocket, because it will be there if you need it. And if you don't need it, you've learned from it anyway. But yeah, I think we've all got to be very careful not to suddenly just do this massive shift in another direction and then maybe not be able to recover our pre-existing business as a result.
Great. Thanks, Louisa.
Okay.
Thank you,
No
Paul. Can I have a virtual round of applause from our video wall?
Everyone.
That was absolutely spot on. Please do connect with Louisa on social. You put your LinkedIn was on that slide, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as well. I'm not very good on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, but not really on Twitter.
I'm more of a Twitter voyeur.
So, yes.
Very rarely post.
Comment every now and again. But yes, I'm on LinkedIn, or you know, just contact me via email. The new website is up as well. So go and have a nosy. But yeah, my details are on there. So just email me on my direct email address.
Brilliant. We'll circulate the slides from today as well, and those contact details will be in that follow-up email as well. As I say, share the hell out of it on social media, and this video will be published later, and I think you'll agree it's well worth people watching it again on YouTube. So when you see it, please do say that. The next Chamber Live, you'll see them all at chamberlive.co.uk, and the Fitness Evolution team will be leading Chamber Live Lunge and Learn, love that name, on the 21st of May. You can join that also from chamberlive.co.uk. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks, Louisa.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.